March morning 2015, an email was sent, just a few short lines, but enough to ignite a marital tragedy. The recipient, Stacy Feldman, the wife of Robert, a man everyone in the neighborhood thought was perfect. The sender, his mistress. Her message was simple. He told me you two were divorced. A few hours later, Stacy was found dead in the bathroom. No cries for help, no witnesses. No one knew what really happened behind those four walls. Only that the truth would stay buried for 7 long years. This isn't just the story of a murder. It's an indictment of those who hide behind the mask of a loving husband. Subscribe, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments. Have you ever believed that one lie could destroy an entire family? Before everything fell apart, Stacy Feldman was the kind of woman everyone loved. A devoted mother, a loyal friend, and someone who truly believed that happiness could be built with kindness and patience. Born in Indiana, Stacy was the youngest of 3 sisters, the child of light, as her father used to call her. She was lively, funny, loved the color pink, and adored small parties filled with laughter. When she moved to Denver, Colorado, she quickly became the heart of the community, serving as president of the Southmore Elementary PTA, where her 2 young children went to school. People said she had an energy that made others want to be better. Then she met Robert Feldman, 14 years older, charming, handsome, and seemingly successful. They met through friends, and within months, Robert convinced Stacy she had finally found her missing piece. Their wedding in Montreal was a fairy tale. Stacy wore a crystal tiara, glowing as she vowed to love him forever, believing she had found her home. For the first few years, everything looked perfect. Their 2-story home in suburban Denver was full of laughter. They had 2 beautiful children. Through weekend parties, and to everyone around them, they were the ideal family. But behind closed doors, the cracks began to show. Robert, the man who once promised to provide, kept failing at work. He bounced from one job to another, never lasting long. Stacy, who once dreamed of being a full-time mom, had to return to work to keep the family afloat. She joined a non-profit organization, doing her best to hold everything together. While Robert grew increasingly controlling, he took over every financial account, managed all the credit cards, and even locked her out of their bank access. Friends recalled that whenever Stacy wanted to go out or buy something, she had to ask permission. Phone calls, text messages, social media. All of it went through Robert's watchful eyes. Outwardly, Stacy still smiled, still volunteered, still helped others. But one close friend later said she always smiled, but her eyes were sad, like she was hiding something she couldn't say out loud. To the world, Stacy looked like the perfect wife, but inside she was living in a controlled marriage where love had turned into fear. Robert knew how to play the role, to apologize, to promise, to cry. And whenever Stacy thought about leaving, he'd say the same familiar lines, "I'll change." For the kids, let's try one more time. And Stacy, who believed everyone deserves a second chance, stayed. She didn't know that every act of forgiveness was only bringing Robert one step closer to the moment he'd destroy her. To the outside world, Robert Feldman was the picture of a loving husband and devoted father. The man who attended school meetings, charity events, and posed for family photos with his wife. But when the night fell and the door to their house closed, he became someone else entirely. Online, he was Robert Wolf, a charming, educated divorcee in his 40s. When he wanted a change, he became Mike Reed, a laid-back entrepreneur who loved books and mountain biking. Each dating profile was carefully crafted. A confident smile, a crisp white shirt, and a few simple lines. Experienced, a good listener, looking for something real. None of the women who swiped right could have imagined that behind that polished image was a habitual lie, the affair. In February 2015, Susan McBride, an independent woman working in healthcare, matched with Robert Wolf on Tinder. He was witty, soft-spoken, and knew just how to make her feel special. He made me laugh, Susan later said. Our conversations felt so natural. I really thought he might be a good man. They met for coffee. Robert told her he was divorced, that his ex-wife didn't care about their kids, and that he was just looking to be loved again. Susan felt sympathy more than suspicion. They kept seeing each other. Dinners, long talks about books, movies, and life philosophies he recited like a man who had lived deeply. By the end of February, they spent the night together. Then suddenly Robert changed. He stopped replying to messages, cancelled plans, disappeared. Uneasy, Susan decided to search for the truth. She typed Robert Wolfe and nothing. Then she tried another name he had mentioned once, Robert Feldman. And within a few clicks, the mask fell. On the Southmore Elementary website, she saw a smiling photo of Stacy Feldman, listed as PTA president. Below it, the caption read, Stacy Feldman, wife of Robert Feldman. Her heart sank. The man she had trusted was married, with 2 children. And worse, he had deceived not just her, but his wife. The email that changed everything. Susan didn't stay silent. The next morning, March 1st, 2015, she opened her email and typed just a few sharp, clear lines. Subject, you deserve to know. Hi, Stacy. My name is Susan McBride. I met your husband on Tinder. He told me you 2 were divorced. I think you should know the truth. Minutes later, Susan's phone rang. It was Stacy. There was no crying, no screaming. Just a quiet, weary voice. Thank you. This isn't your fault. He's cheated before. I'm done with him. Those were the last words Stacy Feldman ever said about her husband, and they would become her death sentence. Because only a few hours later, the woman of light, the one who believed in love and forgiveness, would be gone forever. And from that moment, the web of lies Robert Feldman had been spinning for years would begin to unravel. March 1st, 2015, Denver bathed in soft morning sunlight. To everyone else, it was just another quiet Sunday. But for the Feldman family, it was the day everything ended. That morning, Robert Feldman claimed he woke up early and took their 2 kids to a religious class at Temple Sinai around 8:30 a.m. Stacy stayed home, as usual, planning to pick them up at noon and take them to the Purim festival, a joyful Jewish celebration. That was the plan. But Stacy never showed up. By midday, teachers tried calling her, no answer. They called again several times. Still silence. Finally, they contacted Robert. He told them, oh, maybe one of her friends is picking them up. But nearly an hour later, no one came. Only then did Robert arrive, nearly an hour late, sweating and flustered. When the teachers asked what happened, he simply said, sorry, I thought Stacy was coming. Something about him felt off. He didn't seem truly worried, just performing the role of a confused husband. Instead of rushing home, Robert took the kids to the Purim celebration, then stopped by a bike shop. It wasn't until nearly 3 p.m. that he finally returned home. And just minutes later, the 911 call came in. His voice was hurried, shaky, but strangely calm. My wife's not breathing. Please, she's not breathing. When paramedics arrived, they found Stacy lying motionless in the bathroom. Her hair was dry, the floor spotless. No puddles, no spilled shampoo, no sign of anyone slipping. Everything, the bottles, towels, shelves, was perfectly in place. There wasn't a single drop of water on the floor. No wet footprints. Nothing that said someone just took a shower. Her body, however, told a different story. Bruises across her arms and torso, scratches old and new. And one detail stood out most. She was still wearing her silver and gold wristwatch, something no one would ever wear in the shower. Robert tried to explain it away. She was tired. Last night she had some food with marijuana. She took painkillers. Maybe she overdosed. But toxicology results revealed no marijuana, no fentanyl, no drugs of any kind in Stacy's system. No poison, no medical emergency, no clear cause of death. The autopsy report listed it simply, cause of death undetermined. And just like that, the case was closed. No arrest, no charges. Just another tragic accident in the bathroom. At the funeral, Robert wore black, holding his children close, crying like a man who had lost everything. But behind those tears, something felt wrong. Police noticed one small but crucial detail. When asked to recount his morning, Robert kept changing his story. If Stacy's death was truly an accident, why did her husband have so much to hide? When the coroner's report came back, it contained one cold, emotionless line, cause of death undetermined, and just like that, it seemed over. Stacy Feldman, 44 years old, mother of 2, was buried as the victim of a tragic bathroom accident. But not everyone believed that story. The first to doubt. The first was Susan Altman, Stacy's older sister. When she got the call about Stacy's death, her reaction wasn't shock, it was suspicion. I knew it right away. He killed her. That's what Susan told police just hours after hearing the news, because she knew exactly who Robert Feldman really was. A failed salesman. Always complaining, always scheming to bend the rules for his own gain. She'd once watched him deliberately damage a suitcase, just to demand a new one from the airline. He was the kind of man who lived by deception, and Stacy had been living with him for nearly a decade. The family knew the marriage wasn't as perfect as it looked. Stacy had tried to leave several times, but every time she got close, Robert would cry, beg, and promise to change. He knew how to pull her heartstrings, and the most heartbreaking part for Susan was that her sister believed him. The smell of bleach when Susan arrived in Denver, the house looked untouched, as if Stacy had just stepped out for a moment. But when she entered the bathroom, the sharp scent of bleach hit her nose. It made her skin crawl. She asked an officer, "Did he clean up in here?" The officer hesitated. "We didn't find any signs of a crime," but Susan couldn't let it go. There was one small detail, something only family would notice. Stacy never wore her watch in the shower. Never. That detail haunted her, so she began to dig through timelines, calls and witness statements. Nothing lined up. Robert claimed he came home around 3 p.m., but a neighbor swore they saw his car parked out front much earlier, and when asked why it took nearly 5 hours for him to discover his wife's body, he gave a vague answer. "I went shopping, then worked out." The mistress speaks meanwhile. Susan McBride, the woman who had dated Robert on Tinder, was fighting her own guilt. 3 months after Stacy's death, she stumbled upon an obituary online. It read, "Stacy Feldman passed away March 1st, 2015. The same morning she had sent her warning email. "I felt sick," Susan said later. "I knew she died because of him." She immediately contacted police, detailing her relationship with Robert, the call she received from Stacy, and the email she had sent just hours before the death. But by then the case file was closed. No cause of death. No solid evidence. No crime, at least not on paper. The investigation was shelved. 2 women. One truth, yet 2 women. One living. One gone for remained bound by the same truth. Robert Feldman lied. And buried somewhere inside those lies was the key to Stacy's death. But justice doesn't sleep forever. 2 years later, from a single unexpected conversation, that small spark of doubt would reignite and explode into one of the most shocking murder investigations in America. 2 years after Stacy Feldman's death, her case file sat buried under a thick layer of dust in the Denver police archives. On paper, it was still labeled as a death by undetermined cause. But to her sister, Susan Altman, that word, accident, was a dagger lodged deep in her chest. And she refused to let it stay there. She reached out to domestic violence experts, emailed dozens of forensic specialists, begging someone, anyone, to take another look. Finally, one name answered, Dr. Bill Smock, a world-renowned forensic expert in strangulation and asphyxiation, known for his work on some of America's most high-profile murder cases. The forensic breakthrough. October 2017, Dr. Smock received the Stacy Feldman case file. Sitting in his office, he opened each photograph, zooming in on every bruise, every scratch, every faint red mark around her mouth. The longer he looked, the colder his expression became. No, this wasn't an accident. He wrote 3 words in his notebook: violent assault case. Over the next several weeks, Dr. Smock examined more than 300 photos from the autopsy and the crime scene. What he found was chilling. Stacy's body showed over 80 separate injuries. Bruises, abrasions, lacerations, burst blood vessels in her eyes, all consistent with a struggle, not a fall. Her front tooth was chipped, indicating that something, likely a hand, had been pressed over her mouth. Symmetrical bruises on both upper arms suggested someone had pinned her down with their knees. Petechial hemorrhages, tiny blood spots in her eyes, revealed classic signs of strangulation or suffocation. Even faint fabric impressions were visible on her skin, proving she was fully dressed during the assault, contradicting Robert's story that she died while taking a shower. In his 32-page report, Dr. Smock concluded with certainty this was not a fall. Stacy Feldman died from strangulation and asphyxiation, sustained during a violent struggle. The pattern of injuries indicates pressure from a knee used to restrain her. Those words, by not a fall, were the first bullet that reopened the case. Justice rekindled when investigators read Dr. Smock's report. The doubts vanished. Everything that once seemed odd but inconclusive now connected perfectly. Robert's timeline that didn't add up. The dry floor, the dry hair, the battered body. The shifting lies about drugs, marijuana, and discovering his wife dead. In February 2018, Robert Feldman was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. After 3 long years of silence, justice finally knocked on the door. Susan broke down in tears when she heard the news. Finally, my sister's voice has been heard. The fight for justice, but the road to justice was far from easy. Robert hired a team of top defense attorneys, paid for with the $750,000 life insurance policy he'd collected from Stacy's death. The case dragged on for 4 more years, delayed by the COVID-19 pandemic and countless legal maneuvers. Appeals, motions for continuance, new lawyers, challenges to expert witnesses. During all that time, Robert lived freely at home, cycling around the neighborhood, posting photos online, acting like nothing had happened. What he didn't know was that every line in Dr. Smock's report, every bruise on Stacy's body, was becoming the voice of justice. By 2022, when the court finally reopened the case, one prosecutor said, Stacy Feldman is finally speaking. Through the evidence her body left behind. 7 years after Stacy Feldman's death, the courtroom in Denver was packed. The media called it the most delayed domestic homicide trial in modern history. At the defendant's table sat Robert Feldman, arms folded, face cold as stone. No emotion, no remorse, no tears. The trial lasted 9 days. And over those 9 days, every piece of the 2015 accident was taken apart. Detail by detail, lie by lie. The expert speaks. The first witness was Dr. Bill Smock, the man whose work had revived the case. Before the jury, he placed a life-sized mannequin on the table and demonstrated how Robert attacked his wife. He knelt beside it, pressing a knee onto the mannequin's arm, wrapping his hands around the neck. And when the victim struggles, he said, pointing at the throat, the blood flow stops here. In 8 seconds, she loses consciousness. In 2 minutes, she's dead. The room fell silent. No one believed this was an accident anymore. The voices of the living. When Stacy's daughter took the stand, the air grew heavy. Her voice trembled, but her words pierced through the silence. That morning, Mom was fine. She made breakfast. She laughed with us. There was nothing unusual. A 16-year-old girl forced to recall the last morning she saw her mother alive. It was the most heartbreaking evidence of all. Then came Susan McBride, the woman who had sent Stacy the warning email. She described that final call. She wasn't angry, Susan said softly. She just said, I'm done with him. Susan paused, tears welling up. I didn't know. That would be the last time anyone ever heard her talk about him. The Body Speaks prosecutor, Maggie Conboy, stood before the jury, voice low, pointing to a photo of Stacy's body. She can't tell you what happened that day, Conboy said, but her body told us everything. Forensic photos appeared on the screen. 80 separate injuries, a chipped tooth, burst blood vessels in her eyes, knee-shaped bruises on her arms. Each image was a silent accusation. Robert? He just sat there, occasionally smirking, scribbling notes, as if this entire trial had nothing to do with him. The verdict. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Just one short sentence, but it ended 7 years of deceit. We find the defendant, Robert Feldman, guilty of first-degree murder. Susan Altman clutched her sister's photo, tears streaming down her face. It took 7 years for my sister's truth to be heard, she said, but finally it was. Judge Edward Madden delivered the sentence, life in prison, no parole. Robert lowered his head, said nothing. When asked if he wanted to speak, he simply replied coldly, no. Justice at last outside the courthouse. Susan faced reporters, eyes red but steady. Justice never comes too late, she said. Sometimes it just takes women who refuse to stay silent. Behind that verdict lay something far greater, a message about love, resilience, and the power of women who refuse to let the truth die. Because even after 7 long years, the light of justice, though buried, found its way back to the surface. When Robert Feldman was sentenced to life in prison without parole, many thought the story had finally ended. But in truth, it was only the beginning of something greater. A legacy of strength. Susan Altman, Stacy's brave sister, founded Stacy's Fund, a foundation that supports victims of domestic violence. Every year, it helps dozens of women find shelter, legal aid, and, most importantly, the belief that they deserve to live. Dr. Bill Smock, the forensic expert who gave Stacy her final voice, has since worked on hundreds more cases, continuing his mission to speak for the silenced. Every bruise, every scratch, he says, here's the voice of someone who can no longer speak. Stacy's 2 children now live with loving relatives, growing up surrounded by care and the memory of their kind. Courageous mother, the light that remains in Denver. Stacy Feldman's name is no longer tied to tragedy. It has become a symbol of awareness and women's strength. Every year on March 1st, candles are lit and signs reading "Justice for Stacy" appear across memorial gatherings, a reminder that even delayed, justice can still defeat deceit, because a killer can silence a